Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the UES Determination, watching the massive alien fleet approach. 12 years had passed since first contact with the Zephyrian Empire, and today marked humanity's first official military demonstration. The invitation had come as a surprise. The galactic community wanted to see what Earth's warriors could do. Nervous? Asked Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, joining her at the observation deck. Sarah shook her head, though her knuckles were white against the metal railing. Just focused. We've got one shot to prove ourselves. The Zephyrian flagship Celestial Dawn dwarfed their vessel by a factor of 10. Its crystal blue hull gleamed in the light of the nearby star, and Sarah could see smaller ships detaching from its bays, observers from dozens of species, all here to witness humanity's combat capabilities. Admiral Kethvar's voice crackled through the communication system, his translator rendering his words in perfect English with just a hint of condescension. Human vessel, we are prepared to begin the demonstration. Please proceed to the designated combat zone. The combat zone was an asteroid field, carefully selected for today's exercise. Automated targets had been placed throughout the area, some stationary, others moving in predictable patterns. The test seemed straightforward enough. Hit as many targets as possible within a 30-minute window. Sarah made her way to the bridge, where Captain Williams was reviewing the tactical display. All weapon systems are green, he reported. The crew is ready. What exactly are they expecting from us? Sarah asked. Williams pulled up a holographic display showing the previous demonstrations. According to the data they shared, most species use energy-based weapons. Plasma cannons, laser arrays, particle beams. The Zephyrians average about 60% accuracy in these tests. The best recorded performance was the Altarian Collective at 78%. Sarah studied the targeting patterns. Clean, efficient, predictable. The alien weapons fired in straight lines with minimal deviation, their energy beams capable of instant target destruction, but requiring precise aim and significant power management. Sir, called Weapons Officer Liu from her station, we're receiving telemetry data from the observer ships. They're laughing. Captain Williams frowned. Laughing? The translation matrix is picking up what appears to be amusement from multiple species. The Zephyrians are broadcasting on an open channel. They seem to find our weapon systems primitive. Sarah activated her headset and tuned into the alien chatter. The universal translator did its best with the overlapping conversations, but the tone was unmistakable. Condescension mixed with barely concealed mirth. Look at their projectile weapons, came one voice, identified as Altarian. How quaint. They still use kinetic ammunition. Metal slugs fired through tubes, added a Zephyrian observer. How do they expect to hit anything with such crude technology? Perhaps this is their idea of humor, suggested a third voice, this one from the insectoid Krillian delegation. Surely no advanced species would rely on such inefficient weapons. Captain Williams's jaw tightened. Crude technology, is it? Sarah felt a familiar calm settling over her, the same feeling she'd experienced during her years as a Marine sniper, then later as a naval gunnery officer. The aliens saw projectile weapons as primitive, but they didn't understand the sophistication behind humanity's approach to warfare. All stations, this is the captain. We're beginning our approach to the combat zone. Weapons, prepare for engagement. Aye, sir. All gun systems are online. Ammunition bays are loaded and ready. The Determination moved into position, its hull bristling with what the aliens considered antiquated weapons. Railguns, coil guns, traditional powder-fired cannons, and even some experimental Gauss rifles. To alien eyes, they looked like relics from a bygone era. Human vessel. Admiral Kethvar's voice carried a note of barely suppressed amusement. You may begin when ready. Remember, you have 30 minutes to engage as many targets as possible. Accuracy and efficiency will be measured. Sarah took her position at the fire control station. Around her, the gunnery crew prepared for action with practiced efficiency. Each weapon system had been calibrated and tested dozens of times during the journey to this sector. Targets acquired, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sensor station. I'm counting 147 active targets throughout the asteroid field. Mixed stationary and mobile units. The alien observers fell silent, waiting to see how badly the humans would embarrass themselves. Sarah could imagine them placing bets on just how low humanity's accuracy would be. Weapons free, Captain Williams commanded. Sarah's fingers flew across her controls. The first railgun spoke, sending a tungsten dart screaming through space at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile struck a stationary target dead center, but instead of stopping there, it continued through the asteroid behind it, creating a perfectly circular hole. "Target destroyed," reported Rodriguez, but his voice carried a note of surprise. The projectile continued through the asteroid and struck a second target behind it. The alien chatter resumed, but now with a different tone. Confusion rather than amusement. Sarah was already lining up her next shot. The second railgun fired, this time at a moving target. The projectile's trajectory was calculated, not for where the target was, but where it would be. The tungsten dart struck home with devastating precision. But something unexpected happened. The target's destruction created debris that struck two nearby targets, disabling them as well. "3 targets down with 1 shot," Rodriguez called out, his excitement barely contained. The weapons officer at the coil gun station opened fire next. Her projectile was different, a smart round with micro-guidance systems. It struck its primary target. Then fragments from the specially designed warhead sought out and destroyed 4 additional targets in the immediate vicinity. "That's impossible," came a voice from the Alien Observer Network. "Projectile weapons cannot track multiple targets." Captain Williams smiled grimly. "They can if you design them properly," the barrage continued. Each human weapon system demonstrated capabilities that defied alien understanding of kinetic warfare. Guided projectiles that could change course mid-flight. Explosive rounds that created devastating area effects. Penetrator rounds that could destroy multiple targets in a line. Most shocking of all were the seemingly simple bullets that ricocheted off asteroids at precisely calculated angles, striking targets that weren't even in direct line of sight. "How are they doing that?" demanded Admiral Kethvar, his previous amusement completely gone. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she lined up another impossible shot. The aliens understood energy weapons, point, shoot, hit what you're aiming at. But they had never considered the 3-dimensional chess game that projectile warfare could become in the hands of a species that had spent millennia perfecting it. The real demonstration was just beginning. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the human demonstration continued. What had begun as an opportunity to mock primitive human technology was rapidly becoming a masterclass in kinetic warfare that none of them had thought possible. "Lieutenant," Rodriguez called out target confirmations with increasing excitement. 12 targets destroyed in the first 3 minutes, sir. We're already approaching the average performance level of most species." But Sarah Chen wasn't thinking about averages. She was in the zone now. That perfect state of focus where mathematics, physics, and intuition merged into something approaching art. Her fingers danced across the fire control systems, calculating trajectories that took advantage of every asteroid, every gravitational field, every piece of debris in the combat zone. The 4th railgun fired, sending its projectile on what appeared to be a wild trajectory toward empty space. The alien observers began to murmur. Had the humans finally made a mistake? The tungsten dart struck a small asteroid at precisely the right angle and speed. The impact shattered the rock into hundreds of fragments, each piece following a carefully calculated path. Within seconds, 17 targets throughout the field were destroyed by the debris cloud. 17 targets with 1 shot, Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with awe. Admiral Kethvar's communication channel crackled with disbelief. "That cannot be intentional. No species can calculate such complex trajectories in real time." Captain Williams activated his comm system. "Admiral, I think you underestimate what happens when a species spends thousands of years throwing rocks at each other." On the observation deck of the Celestial Dawn, Admiral Kethvar stood rigid, his forearms crossed in a gesture of deep concern. Around him, representatives from across the galaxy watched the tactical display in growing alarm. "Explain this to me," Kethvar demanded of his weapons specialist, Commander Yilseth. "How are they achieving these results with such primitive technology?" Yilseth manipulated the holographic replay, showing the trajectory of the last shot in slow motion. "Sir, they appear to be using the asteroid field itself as part of their weapon system. Each projectile is calculated to create secondary and tertiary effects. That requires computational power beyond anything we've seen from human technology," protested the Altarian observer, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. Yilseth highlighted another trajectory. "Look at this shot, sir. The projectile's path took it past 3 asteroids, using their gravitational fields to slightly alter its course. It's like they're playing billiards with the entire battlefield. Back on the Determination, Sarah was just getting started. She activated the guided munitions system, unleashing a swarm of small projectiles that looked almost pathetic compared to the massive energy beams the aliens were accustomed to seeing. Each projectile was no larger than a human fist, but they moved with purpose through the asteroid field. Unlike the straight-line attacks of energy weapons, these small rounds wove between obstacles, communicated with each other, and coordinated their attacks. Swarm deployment successful, reported Weapons Officer Liu. 64. Smart rounds deployed and hunting. The alien observers watched in fascination as the tiny projectiles spread throughout the combat zone like a school of metallic fish. They moved in complex patterns, some acting as scouts while others positioned themselves for optimal attack angles. They're working together, breathed the Krillian observer. The projectiles are exhibiting pack behavior. The swarm struck simultaneously. 64 targets were eliminated in perfect synchronization, the smart rounds having found optimal firing solutions for maximum effect. Several rounds had even worked together, with one creating a distraction while another struck from an unexpected angle. This is unprecedented, Admiral Kethavar muttered. Projectile weapons that demonstrate tactical intelligence. Sarah wasn't done. She activated the experimental Gauss rifle system, humanity's newest innovation in kinetic weapons. The projectiles from this system were different again, adaptive rounds that could change their properties mid-flight. The first Gauss round fired at what appeared to be a heavily armored target. As it approached, the projectile reconfigured itself, shifting from a penetrator design to an explosive configuration. The target was destroyed, but the round's fragments had been programmed to seek out specific target types in the vicinity. "How many different types of ammunition do they have?" asked the Altarian delegate. Commander Yilseth was frantically analyzing the human weapons systems. "Sir, I count at least 20 different projectile types, each optimized for different tactical situations. They have rounds designed for penetration, area effect, guidance, fragmentation, ricochet targeting, and configurations I don't even recognize." Meanwhile, Sarah activated what the humans called their trick shot protocols. These were firing solutions that had been developed by generations of human marksmen who had learned to use their environment as part of their weapon system. A railgun fired at a moving target, but the projectile deliberately missed, striking an asteroid instead. The impact sent the asteroid spinning in a controlled manner, and its rotation struck 3 other targets as it tumbled through space. "They're using asteroids as weapons," observed the Krillian delegate, his insectoid features clicking with amazement. The next shot was even more impressive. A coilgun projectile struck a target and fragmented, but the fragments had been designed to create a specific debris pattern. The resulting cloud of metal pieces formed a temporary barrier that trapped 6 mobile targets, allowing follow-up shots to destroy them easily. 15 minutes remaining, Captain Williams announced. Sarah nodded, switching to the heavy weapons systems. The aliens were about to see what human engineering could do when size and power were no longer constraints. The main gun spoke. A massive rail cannon that sent a telephone pole-sized projectile screaming through the asteroid field. The round had been designed specifically for this demonstration, and it carried a special payload. The projectile struck the largest asteroid in the field and buried itself deep into the rock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the asteroid began to split apart in a carefully controlled manner, each section flying off in a predetermined direction. "The asteroid is breaking apart in perfect geometric patterns," reported Commander Yilseth, his voice barely above a whisper. Each section of the shattered asteroid struck clusters of targets throughout the field. The humans had essentially turned a single large rock into dozens of guided missiles, each one precisely aimed and timed for maximum effect. 37 targets destroyed with one shot, Rodriguez called out. The alien observers were completely silent now. What they were witnessing challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, physics, and the capabilities of kinetic weapons. Admiral Kethavar found his voice. "How is this possible? Our computers show that the calculations required for these shots would take our most advanced systems several minutes to process." Captain Williams smiled. "Admiral, humans have been calculating trajectories like these since we lived in caves and threw rocks at our dinner. We've just gotten better at it." Sarah was already lining up her next shot, and the aliens were beginning to realize that what they had dismissed as primitive technology was actually the most sophisticated weapon system any of them had ever encountered. Their demonstration was only half over, and humanity was already rewriting the rules of galactic warfare. The silence on the alien observation channels was deafening. In the space of 15 minutes, humanity had destroyed more targets than any species in galactic history, using weapons that every advanced civilization had abandoned millennia ago. But Sarah Chen was far from finished. Switching to adaptive targeting protocols, she announced to her crew. Lieutenant Rodriguez pulled up the next wave of targets on his display. These are the mobile units, Commander. 53 targets with evasive maneuvering capability. The alien observers leaned forward in their respective vessels. Mobile targets were where energy weapons traditionally excelled. Laser beams and plasma bolts traveled at light speed, making them ideal for hitting moving targets. Surely the slow-moving human projectiles would struggle here. Sarah studied the movement patterns of the targets. Each one followed a different evasive protocol, some random, others following complex mathematical sequences designed to confuse targeting computers. What the aliens didn't understand was that humans had been hunting moving prey for hundreds of thousands of years. Liu, activate the prediction matrix, Sarah ordered. Weapons Officer Liu's fingers flew across her console. Prediction matrix online. All mobile targets tracked and analyzed. The human approach to hitting moving targets was fundamentally different from anything the galactic community had seen. Instead of trying to hit where the target was or even where it would be, the humans calculated where it would be forced to go. The first shot seemed to miss completely, striking empty space several kilometers ahead of a rapidly maneuvering target. The aliens began to murmur with relief. Perhaps the humans were finally showing their limitations. Then the projectile exploded. But this wasn't a simple explosive round. The detonation created a carefully shaped debris field that forced the target to alter its course in a specific direction. Exactly where Sarah had predicted it would go. The second projectile was already waiting. Target destroyed, Rodriguez announced. The evasive maneuvers led it directly into the kill zone. Admiral Kaithvar's voice was strained. They're not just hitting moving targets. They're controlling where the targets move. Sarah smiled grimly and fired again. This time she used a technique that human hunters had perfected millennia ago. The coordinated pack hunt. Multiple projectiles were fired in sequence, each one designed to herd the target toward a specific location. The mobile target, an advanced drone with sophisticated evasive programming, found its options systematically eliminated. Every escape route was blocked by incoming projectiles, each one forcing it into an increasingly smaller area of space. The final shot was almost anticlimactic. With nowhere left to run, the target was easily destroyed. "They're hunting," whispered the Krillian observer. "Like pack predators." The next demonstration made the aliens even more uncomfortable. Sarah activated what the humans called predictive suppression, a technique developed during Earth's various wars when ammunition was scarce and every shot had to count. She fired a single round at a cluster of 5 mobile targets. The projectile struck the lead target, but the real purpose was the debris pattern it created. The explosion sent fragments in precisely calculated directions, creating barriers that forced the remaining 4 targets into predictable evasion patterns. "Now they're hurting multiple targets simultaneously," Commander Yilseth observed, his voice filled with growing dread. The follow-up shots were devastating. Each target, forced into a predetermined flight path, was easily eliminated by projectiles that had been fired before the herding even began. 5 targets down in 12 seconds, Rodriguez reported. But Sarah was already moving to the next phase of the demonstration. She activated the human weapon system that the aliens would find most disturbing of all, the learning ammunition. "Deploying adaptive smart rounds," she announced. The projectiles that emerged from the Determination's launch tubes looked identical to the earlier smart rounds, but these were fundamentally different. Each one contained a miniaturized AI that could learn from the evasive patterns of its target and share that information with other rounds in real time. The mobile target's evasive programs were sophisticated, designed by the best military minds in the galaxy. But they were still programs, patterns that could be analyzed, predicted, and countered. The first wave of smart rounds deliberately missed their targets, but each near miss taught them something about their prey's behavior. The second wave incorporated these lessons, getting closer. By the third wave, the rounds were anticipating the target's moves with frightening accuracy. "The projectiles are learning," the Altarian delegate reported, his crystalline form flickering with alarm. "Each attack is more accurate than the last." Admiral Kethavar watched the tactical display with growing horror. "How is this possible? Projectile weapons cannot possess artificial intelligence." Captain Williams activated his comm system. "Admiral, why would you assume they can't? We put AI in our cars, our homes, our children's toys. Why not our bullets?" The smart rounds were now hunting with deadly efficiency. They had learned to recognize the evasive patterns of their targets and could predict future movements with near-perfect accuracy. Worse, they were sharing this knowledge instantaneously across the entire swarm. Within minutes, every mobile target in the field was being tracked by multiple rounds that knew exactly how it would try to escape. "This is impossible," Kethvar muttered. Intelligence and individual projectiles would require computational resources that exceed the size constraints of such small weapons. Sarah overheard the transmission and decided to enlighten them. "Admiral, our AI doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough. When you fire thousands of rounds, even a simple learning algorithm becomes incredibly effective." The demonstration of learning ammunition concluded with a finale that left the aliens speechless. Sarah fired a single smart round at a target that had successfully evaded 17 previous attacks. The round missed as expected, but it had learned something crucial from all those near misses. The projectile executed a maneuver that no one had ever seen before. It used a small asteroid as a slingshot, redirected itself using micro-thrusters, and struck its target from an angle that the evasive program had never been designed to handle. The projectile used the environment to create its own attack vector, Commander Yilseth reported in disbelief. But the most disturbing part came next. The successful attack pattern was immediately transmitted to every other smart round in the field. Within seconds, targets that had been impossible to hit were being destroyed by projectiles that had learned from their predecessors' success. 10 minutes remaining, Captain Williams announced. Sarah nodded and prepared for the final phase of the demonstration. The aliens had seen human accuracy, adaptability, and learning capability. Now they would see human creativity. "Activating experimental systems," she announced. The weapons that emerged from the Determination's hidden bays were unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. They looked more like construction equipment than weapons. Massive railguns with unusual attachments, projectiles that seemed to be carrying cargo rather than explosives. "What are those?" asked the Krillian observer. Sarah's answer would haunt the alien military establishments for generations to come. "Those are our construction tools. Sometimes the best way to destroy something is to build something better in its place." The first experimental round struck an asteroid and began to unfold. Within minutes, the projectile had constructed a small automated factory that began producing additional projectiles from the asteroid's raw materials. "They're building weapons platforms in real time," Admiral Kethvar whispered. The second experimental round was even more frightening. It struck a cluster of targets and began to spread, converting their material into additional smart rounds that immediately joined the hunt for remaining targets. The aliens realized they weren't just watching a weapons demonstration. They were witnessing the birth of a completely new form of warfare, one where the battlefield itself became part of the weapon system, and humanity was just getting started. The experimental weapon systems were transforming the battlefield in ways that no alien species had ever imagined possible. What had begun as a simple marksmanship test was becoming a demonstration of humanity's most fundamental strength, their ability to turn any environment into a weapon. Admiral Kethvar found himself gripping the rail of his observation deck as he watched the human projectiles literally reshape the asteroid field. "Commander Yilseth, explain to me what I'm seeing." Yilseth manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the spreading network of human constructions. "Sir, the humans appear to be using their projectiles as seeds for self-replicating weapons platforms. Each successful impact creates a new manufacturing node. The small factory that had emerged from the first experimental round was already producing its third generation of smart projectiles. But these weren't simple copies of the original design. Each new round incorporated improvements based on real-time battlefield data, becoming more sophisticated with each iteration. "They're evolving their ammunition during the battle," observed the Altarian delegate, his crystalline form pulsing with anxiety. Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The humans had learned long ago that the best weapon was often the one you built while fighting. Their military engineers had spent decades developing projectiles that could adapt not just their targeting, but their entire design philosophy based on battlefield conditions. "Liu, deploy the terraform rounds," Sarah ordered. "Terraform rounds?" Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his station. "Commander, those are still experimental. Today's all about experiments," Sarah replied with a grim smile. The terraform rounds were humanity's answer to a question no other species had ever thought to ask. What if you could remake the battlefield to suit your weapons instead of adapting your weapons to suit the battlefield? The first terraform round struck a large asteroid and began its work. Instead of simply exploding or creating a manufacturing platform, it started to systematically reshape the rock's structure. Within minutes, the asteroid was transforming into a complex geometric shape that created specific gravitational and electromagnetic effects. "What is it doing?" Admiral Kethvar demanded. Captain Williams activated his comm system. "It's creating a gravity lens, Admiral. We're turning that asteroid into a targeting computer that can bend the path of projectiles around obstacles." The second terraform round struck another asteroid and began creating what looked like a massive tuning fork. As it took shape, the structure began to emit precise electromagnetic pulses that interfered with the guidance systems of the remaining targets. "They're building weapons platforms out of space debris," Commander Yilseth reported, his voice barely above a whisper. But the most impressive terraform round was yet to come. Sarah fired it at a cluster of 3 asteroids that were positioned in a rough triangle. The round somehow managed to strike all 3 simultaneously, beginning a coordinated transformation process. The aliens watched in fascination as the 3 asteroids began moving toward each other under the influence of carefully controlled gravitational manipulation. As they converged, they started to merge and reshape, forming a structure that looked like a massive railgun barrel. "They're building a cannon out of asteroids," the Krillian observer stated flatly. The asteroid cannon took shape rapidly, its structure optimized by the terraform round's sophisticated engineering algorithms. Within 10 minutes of the initial impact, humanity had constructed a weapons platform that dwarfed anything on their ship. But the aliens were in for another shock. The asteroid cannon didn't fire conventional projectiles. Instead, it launched packages that deployed into complex networks of smart materials that could reshape themselves based on tactical requirements. 5 minutes remaining, Captain Williams announced. Sarah nodded and prepared for the finale. The aliens had seen human ingenuity, adaptability, and engineering prowess. Now they would see why humanity had never lost a war once they decided they truly wanted to win. "Activating the swarm protocol," she announced. Every remaining projectile in the human arsenal suddenly changed behavior. Instead of acting as individual weapons, they began operating as a single, coordinated entity. Smart rounds shared targeting data with terraform rounds. Manufacturing platforms coordinated with learning systems. The asteroid cannon synchronized its firing pattern with the gravity lens. The alien observers found themselves watching something that challenged their understanding of warfare itself. The humans hadn't just brought weapons to the demonstration. They had brought an entire weapons ecosystem that could adapt, learn, and evolve in real time. "This is no longer a weapons test," Admiral Kethvar said quietly. "This is a demonstration of technological supremacy." The coordinated swarm began its final assault on the remaining targets. But instead of simply destroying them, the human systems started capturing and converting them. Defeated targets became raw materials for new projectiles. Their guidance systems were reprogrammed and integrated into the human network. "They're not just winning," observed the Altarian delegate. "They're absorbing the opposition." Sarah's final command was simple. "Show them what we can really do." The entire human weapons network activated simultaneously. The asteroid cannon fired a massive projectile that deployed into a cloud of nanoscale machines. The gravity lens focused the paths of hundreds of smart rounds into perfect targeting solutions. The manufacturing platforms pumped out specialized ammunition at an incredible rate. But the most impressive part was the coordination. Every element of the human weapons system worked together with perfect synchronization, creating effects that were far greater than the sum of their parts. In the space of 30 seconds, every remaining target in the asteroid field was eliminated. Not destroyed, eliminated. The targets were converted into raw materials, their components incorporated into the growing human weapons network. When the demonstration timer reached 0, the battlefield had been completely transformed. Where once there had been an asteroid field with artificial targets, there was now a complex network of human-built weapons platforms, manufacturing nodes, and coordinated smart systems. Final count, Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with awe. 217 targets eliminated, 0 projectiles wasted. The battlefield has been completely pacified and converted to human control. The alien observers sat in stunned silence. The highest previous score in the demonstration had been 78% accuracy, with basic target destruction. Humanity had achieved 100% target elimination, while simultaneously conquering the entire testing area. Admiral Kethavar was the first to find his voice. "How many rounds did you fire?" Captain Williams consulted his tactical display. 47 projectiles, Admiral. 47 rounds eliminated 217 targets? No, sir, Sarah interjected over the comm system. 47 rounds conquered 217 targets and built a self-sustaining weapons network capable of manufacturing additional rounds indefinitely. There's a difference. The implications hit the alien observers like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just demonstrated superior marksmanship. They had shown that their approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species saw weapons as tools for destruction, humans saw them as seeds for creation. Every shot fired was an investment in future capability. Every target hit became a resource for further expansion. Commander Chen, Admiral Kethavar's voice was carefully controlled. What exactly did we just witness? Sarah's response would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Admiral, you just saw what happens when a species that learned to throw rocks decides to get serious about it. The demonstration was over, but the real implications were just beginning to sink in. The aftermath of the demonstration left the alien observer fleet in chaos. Emergency sessions were being called on every ship as military advisors tried to process what they had just witnessed. The humans hadn't simply outperformed expectations, they had redefined what warfare could be. Admiral Kethavar stood in his command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the transformed asteroid field. Where the testing ground once stood, a network of human-built weapons platforms continued to operate autonomously, manufacturing new projectiles and improving their designs with each passing minute. Sir, Commander Yilseth approached cautiously, we're receiving urgent communications from the Galactic Defense Council. They want a full report immediately. Kethavar nodded grimly. What do I tell them, Commander? That humanity has made every weapon system in the galaxy obsolete overnight? On the observation deck of the Altarian vessel, Delegate Zix Thara was engaged in a heated discussion with their military attaché. This changes everything, the crystalline being pulsed with agitated light patterns. Our entire defense strategy assumes that projectile weapons are inferior to energy-based systems. The humans have proven that assumption false, replied the military attaché. But how? Our analysis indicates that their technology shouldn't be capable of these results. Meanwhile, aboard the Krillian science vessel, Observer Clickdith was frantically analyzing the recorded data from the demonstration. Their insectoid form chittered with excitement and fear as patterns emerged from the chaos. They're not using brute force, Clickdith reported to their superiors. Every human projectile serves multiple purposes simultaneously. Weapon, tool, building material, communication node, manufacturing seed. It's like they've compressed an entire industrial civilization into each bullet. The human demonstration had achieved something that no alien species thought possible. They had turned individual projectiles into self-contained technological ecosystems. Back on the Determination, Sarah Chen was fielding communications from across the galaxy as word of the demonstration spread. Military leaders, scientists, and politicians all wanted to understand how humanity had achieved the impossible. Commander, Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his communication station. We're receiving requests for detailed technical specifications from 17 different species. They want to understand our weapon systems. Captain Williams shook his head. Standard response, Lieutenant. Our technical specifications are classified under human military protocols. But the truth was more complex than simple classification. The alien observers didn't understand that human weapons technology wasn't just about the hardware, and it was about the philosophy behind their use. Sarah activated her personal communication system and opened a channel to Admiral Kethvar. Admiral, I believe we need to have a conversation. Indeed we do. Commander Chen, my superiors are demanding explanations that I'm not sure I can provide. Then perhaps it's time for some honesty, Sarah replied. May I transport over to your ship? I think this discussion requires a more personal touch. An hour later, Sarah found herself in the observation lounge of the Celestial Dawn, facing a gathering of the galaxy's most senior military leaders. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and barely concealed hostility. Admiral Kethvar gestured to the holographic display, showing the transformed asteroid field. Commander Chen, explain to us how this is possible. Our analysis indicates that your projectiles performed functions that should require massive industrial installations. Sarah studied the gathering of alien officers. Each represented a different approach to warfare, but all shared the same fundamental limitation. They thought about weapons and tools as separate categories. Admiral, may I ask you a question first? When your species first developed tools, what was their primary purpose? Kethvar's forearm shifted in a gesture of confusion. Tools are for construction and manufacturing. Weapons are for destruction. The purposes are entirely different. And there's your problem, Sarah replied. Humans never made that distinction. Our first tools were rocks that we threw at prey. Our first weapons were sticks that we used to dig for food. We've always understood that the best tools are multifunctional. Delegate Zixithara's crystalline form pulsed with skeptical light. But your projectiles demonstrated capabilities that exceed any known technology. They built manufacturing platforms from raw materials in minutes. Sarah nodded. Because each projectile carries the compressed knowledge of human industrial development. Imagine taking everything your species knows about construction, manufacturing, and engineering, then miniaturizing it into something the size of your thumb. Impossible, stated the Krillian observer flatly. The computational requirements alone would exceed the capacity of such small devices. You're thinking about it wrong, Sarah explained patiently. You don't need to carry the complete knowledge, you just need to carry the seeds of that knowledge. Each projectile contains templates that can unfold and adapt based on available materials and conditions. She activated her portable holographic projector, showing a simplified diagram of human projectile technology. Think of it like biological DNA. A single cell contains the information needed to build an entire organism, but it doesn't carry a complete blueprint of every possible protein. Instead, it carries the rules for making proteins based on environmental needs. The alien officers leaned forward, finally beginning to understand. Human projectiles weren't just weapons. They were technological seeds that could grow into whatever the situation required. Admiral Kethvar was the first to grasp the implications. Your projectiles can adapt because they carry the fundamental principles of your technology, not just specific designs. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. A human smart round doesn't just know how to hit targets. It knows the principles of ballistics, materials science, and tactical coordination. When it encounters a new situation, it applies those principles to develop solutions on the fly. Observer Clickteth chittered nervously. But the learning capability we observed, your projectiles were sharing knowledge instantaneously across vast distances. Quantum entanglement communication, Sarah replied simply. Every projectile is quantum linked to every other projectile in the same batch. They share a collective consciousness that allows them to learn and adapt as a group. The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathering. Quantum entanglement was a theoretical concept that most species had never successfully weaponized. How many of these projectiles do you possess? Asked Delegate Zixithara. Sarah's smile was enigmatic. Admiral Kethvar, how many bullets do you think humanity has manufactured in our history? The alien officers began to understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. If every human projectile possessed these capabilities, then humanity had effectively dispersed a galaxy-spanning artificial intelligence network in the form of ammunition. This conversation never happened, did it? Admiral Kethvar asked quietly. What conversation? Sarah replied. As far as official records show, humanity simply demonstrated superior marksmanship skills during a routine weapons test. But the cat was already out of the bag. Every species represented in the observation fleet would be returning to their homeworlds with the knowledge that humanity possessed weapons technology that made their entire military doctrine obsolete. Commander Chen, Admiral Kethvar spoke carefully. What are humanity's intentions regarding galactic security? Sarah's response was both reassuring and terrifying. Admiral, humanity believes in peace through superior firepower. We have no desire to conquer the galaxy, but we also have no intention of being conquered by anyone else. The meeting concluded with an understanding that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. Humanity would not share their weapons technology, but they would also not use it aggressively against peaceful species. As Sarah prepared to return to her ship, Admiral Kethvar asked one final question. Commander, was today's demonstration a representation of humanity's full capabilities? Sarah paused at the airlock entrance. Admiral, today we showed you what our target practice looks like. You really don't want to see what happens when we're actually trying to hurt someone. The words hung in the air long after she had gone, leaving the alien military leaders to contemplate a universe where humanity's idea of a friendly demonstration had just revolutionized their understanding of warfare. Word of the human demonstration spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every major military installation was analyzing the recorded data, trying to understand how humanity had achieved the impossible. The implications were staggering, and the reactions varied dramatically across different species and governments. In the crystal cities of Altair Prime, the Collective Council convened an emergency session. Delegate Zix Thera stood before the assembled representatives, their crystalline form pulsing with urgent patterns of light. Fellow Altarians, what we witnessed challenges the fundamental assumptions of modern warfare. Human projectile weapons demonstrated capabilities that exceed our most advanced energy systems by orders of magnitude. Prime Crystallarch Velthus shifted his massive form, causing rainbow refractions to dance across the chamber walls. Surely you exaggerate, Delegate. Projectile weapons are primitive technology, abandoned by civilized species millennia ago. With respect, Prime Crystallarch, that assumption nearly cost us our security. The humans didn't just hit targets. They conquered an entire battlefield with fewer than 50 rounds of ammunition. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Altarian Collective had built their entire defense strategy around energy weapon supremacy. If projectile weapons could outperform their systems, their military doctrine was not just obsolete, it was dangerous. Meanwhile, in the hive complexes of Krylia, Observer Cliktith was presenting their analysis to the Swarm Queens. The insectoid species had always prided themselves on their collective intelligence and adaptive capabilities. But what the humans had demonstrated was coordination on a level that even the Krylia had never achieved. The human projectiles displayed true hive mind characteristics. Cliktith chittered to the assembled queens. Each individual unit operated with perfect knowledge of the collective's goals, while maintaining individual initiative and creativity. Queen Zixnara's compound eyes gleamed with interest. You speak of projectiles as if they were living beings. In many ways they are, Cliktith replied. The humans have created artificial life forms whose purpose is warfare. Each projectile can think, learn, adapt, and reproduce. They have weaponized evolution itself. The Swarm Queens exchanged concerned pheromone signals. The Krylia had always believed that their biological approach to technology gave them inherent advantages over mechanical species. The discovery that humans had successfully merged the two approaches was deeply unsettling. On Zephyr Station, Admiral Kethvar was dealing with increasingly frantic communications from the Galactic Defense Council. The military leaders of dozens of species were demanding immediate action to counter the human threat. Admiral, came the voice of Defense Coordinator Malthus. The Council requires your assessment of humanity's military capabilities. Are they a threat to galactic stability? Kethvar considered his words carefully. Coordinator, humanity possesses weapons technology that renders our current defense systems ineffective. However, they have shown no aggressive intentions toward any galactic civilization. That's not what the Council wants to hear, Admiral. We need to know if humanity represents an existential threat. Coordinator, Kethvar said grimly. Humanity doesn't represent a threat to galactic civilization. They represent the evolution of galactic civilization. The question isn't whether we can defend against their technology. The question is whether we can adapt quickly enough to survive in a universe where such technology exists. The political ramifications were already beginning to emerge. Several militant species were calling for preemptive strikes against human colonies before their weapons technology could spread further. Others were desperately trying to negotiate technology-sharing agreements. But the most concerning development was happening in the research facilities across the galaxy. Military scientists were attempting to reverse-engineer human projectile technology based on the demonstration recordings, with predictably disastrous results. On the industrial world of Nexus 7, a team of Vorthan engineers had been working around the clock to replicate human smart round technology. Their latest test had gone catastrophically wrong. Project Director, reported Chief Engineer Bluckstar, the prototype projectile achieved target lock and began pursuit protocols. However, instead of stopping after target destruction, it continued learning and adapting. Director Yunthai examined the test chamber through reinforced viewing ports. Where is it now? Unknown, sir. The projectile broke out of the test facility approximately 6 hours ago. It appears to be using local materials to upgrade itself and reproduce. The Vorthan military was now hunting their own creation through the industrial complexes of Nexus 7, a rogue projectile that was building copies of itself from scavenged materials and growing more sophisticated with each iteration. Similar incidents were being reported across the galaxy as species attempted to duplicate human technology without understanding the underlying principles. The human demonstration had been more than a weapons test. It had been a warning about the dangers of advanced projectile warfare in untrained hands. Back on Earth, the human military leadership was monitoring these developments with growing concern. General Martinez stood in the Situation Room beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by holographic displays showing galactic intelligence reports. It's exactly what we predicted, reported Colonel Singh. Every major power is either trying to copy our technology or preparing for war against us. Any successful reverse engineering attempts? Asked General Martinez. None so far, but several species have created runaway projectile scenarios. The Vorthans lost an entire industrial facility to a self-replicating smart round. The Kepler Union accidentally created a projectile swarm that's still consuming asteroids in their outer system. General Martinez nodded grimly. And the diplomatic situation? Mixed. Some species are requesting formal alliances. Others are preparing for what they see as inevitable human expansion. The Galactic Defense Council is split between those who want to contain us and those who want to join us. The situation was evolving rapidly, and humanity found itself in an unprecedented position. They had revealed capabilities that made them the dominant military power in the galaxy, but they had also painted a target on themselves that could unite their enemies against them. Sir, called Communications Director Reynolds, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian Empire. Admiral Kethvar is requesting immediate diplomatic contact. General Martinez activated the communication system. Admiral, what can we do for you? Kethvar's image appeared on the holographic display, his forearms crossed in a gesture of formal respect. General Martinez, I'm contacting you on behalf of a coalition of galactic powers. We have a proposition. I'm listening, Admiral. Several species have proposed the formation of a new galactic alliance, one with humanity as the primary military power. In exchange for your protection and technological guidance, we would offer economic partnership and territorial concessions. General Martinez exchanged glances with his advisors. And the species that aren't interested in this alliance? That's the problem, General. Some civilizations view humanity as an existential threat. They're forming their own coalition with the intention of neutralizing the human threat before it can spread. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity's demonstration of superior weapons technology had divided the galaxy into two camps, those who wanted to join them and those who wanted to destroy them. Admiral, General Martinez said carefully, are you telling me that the galaxy is preparing for war? General, I'm telling you that the galaxy is already at war. The only question is which side humanity will choose to support. The demonstration that had begun as a simple marksmanship test was about to become the opening shot of the largest conflict in galactic history.